From Unity Church of Christianity in Houston, Texas, this is The Awakened Life with Reverend Howard Caesar. Unity is a non-denominational Christian church providing a positive, practical, and progressive approach to Christianity. Let's join the service in progress with the Reverend Howard Caesar.
You know, I'm not about preaching. I'm about teaching. That Unity's main basis is about the teachings of Jesus Christ. It's all about Jesus. And at the same time, Unity and its founders were, in their teachings, they had reached out and studied all religions. And so it became a blending of Eastern and Western thought. And so I'm one who does not feel one should hide with their head in the sands and just not be awake and aware as to what else is going on in the world and what is happening. And that is why as I was drawn to attending the Oneness University in India, because of the compatibility of the teachings, because it's not another religion, but it's actually a bringing together of all religions to learn various principles and ideas that lead to an individual's spiritual awakening. That's exactly what the founders, Charles and Myrtle Fillmore, were all about, was bringing together people of all religions in unity. Unity was their word instead of oneness, unity being oneness. Together, that we're all one family, we're all brothers and sisters. And so I have just returned from my most recent time in India, and this is my first time in the pulpit, and I thought it would be probably appropriate, because some often ask. I'm going to share not so much really of my experience this time, I'll be doing that later today, but it will be just to kind of share some of the things that I've learned, some of the things that are emphasized there. That are teachings and ideas, so I share them with you. To begin with, they share that there are basically three kinds of suffering. There is physical suffering, psychological suffering, and existential suffering. Okay, physical suffering has to do obviously with the body. We can experience disease or pain or injuries and headaches and whatever, that type of thing of the body. Psychological suffering is the most common and has to do obviously with our mind, our mental suffering of internal conflicts, emotional charges, resentments, unforgiveness, painful memories, negative conditionings, all the internal works of the ego, or what they refer to as the separate self, a separate self that we have created, okay? And existential suffering is basically related to one's relationship with God. So as you're dealing with life, sometimes people begin to have doubts about God, fears, a sense of distance, discontent with life, feelings of meaninglessness. So these are the three. The most common form of suffering is the psychological. It's rooted in the mind. And this suffering, basically, if not resolved, can lead to, spilling over into existential as well as spilling over into physical suffering, because we know that there's a mind-body connection. And if you are constantly in fear to great extents and unhappiness and rage or anger or just those energies, and they're not resolved, then they begin to have an effect on us physically, those kinds of stresses. So everyone experiences suffering. At various times, in various degrees, it comes and goes and what have you, okay? And it's important to understand that God is not the source of the suffering. It's very much what they emphasize and teach as well as we do. God is not a punishing God, okay? And it's very important that you release any thought of that. Separation consciousness, our creation of a separate self, apart from God, apart from truth, is really the source of all the suffering that we do to ourselves and we do to each other. And the solution basically is then in growing beyond that separate self and growing into oneness, a oneness consciousness, oneness with God. Because we're separate in consciousness from God and truth in varying degrees, it does not cause God to say, okay, you're therefore a sinner and I'm going to punish you for that and somehow. It is the law of cause and effect that, if anything, is punishing us in life. The law is there for our learning, for our understanding, for our growth. We have to have some feedback mechanism in life, and that's why we're in the physical world. If you take your hand and place it on a hot stove, it will burn you. That's not God punishing you. That's basically a cause that you put into, initiated, and it brought an effect that says, I don't want to do that anymore. Okay, so there are the things in life that we do that we don't want to do any more of, and there are other things that we do want to do more of because they feel good, and we can understand that. Mentally, we've come to understand that every thought has a vibration. Every thought is an energy, a creative energy. So every thought, every idea, every belief, every opinion that we have is creative energy that is creating an experience for us. Our bodies are designed to have us notice and feel these thoughts and feelings. We know that fear is in our body. When it's there, it doesn't feel good. We know when love is in our body being felt, because that does feel good. It also helps if we begin to recognize that most all fear originates in the mind, okay? And fear is a form of suffering. It really has us off center. And that those things that originate in the heart are really virtually always of a higher vibration, usually a tendency of love and forgiveness and some kind of kindness and goodness of the nature of God. So if we are not master of our mind, it's going to cause us problems. So that's one area. So one of the things that we probably seems like a simple question, but it's good to really reflect on, and that is, where does thought come from? All right? Where does thought come from? Well, thought comes from several places. Thought comes from, number one, our response to life. In other words, what we see and what we experience in terms of what is in front of us, moment to moment, day by day. It can be a car pulling out in front of us on the freeway. It can be a sunrise or a sunset. It can be a boss yelling. It can be a store clerk that's saying something nice or unkind or whatever that may, it can be anything that we may respond or react to and provoke something in terms of a stimulant to a thought, a response in us. And when what is seemingly happening good around us, it feels pretty good. We're in a pretty good state. When things are going kind of bad, it's easy for our mind to take us into some form of reactive fear or suffering, unless we've come to be more aware and in charge of our mind. So thought comes as a result of experiencing what is in the moment. That's one kind of thought. There's another kind of thought, a second area of thought that comes from our unconscious, okay, or our subconscious mind. That's the basically storehouse of memories that we have and what we have established from conditioning over the course of our life and all the experiences we've had and all the things we've decided and decisions we've made and opinions we've formed, patterns, conditioned automatic responses. And so this is where our buried fears are. This is where our buried pain and our issues and emotional charges rise up and seemingly take over in us, as if kind of based on our past. We have almost kind of unconscious loyalties to these things, and we all of a sudden are reacting automatically. And that's basically the thoughts coming from the unconscious. And sometimes, we can be, so loyal to a past way of thinking about something that we don't allow new information or an alternative perspective to be given consideration, as we're so locked in. And we just allow ourselves to be on automatic. That information coming in we're not open to. And that's where it's often referred to as a closed mind. Jesus called that basically having your cup full and not having room really for some new infilling, which is more current and in the moment to take you forward, to be taught. And so basically that's another area, is the unconscious. And this, of course, Carl Jung has talked a great deal about. The third area that thought comes from is what I refer to as, and some do, is the thought atmosphere. Okay? It's what Carl Jung referred to as the collective unconscious. It's like thoughts are there floating around in the thought atmosphere, if you will. It's like a thought soup that we live in, and that every workplace and every home and every company has an atmosphere of a consciousness of thoughts going on there. And we can walk into a room and we can feel uplifted because there's genuinely a pleasant energy going on there, a joyfulness. Or we can walk into a room and we can feel the heaviness because there's kind of like an unspoken energy of conflict that is underlying, and people feel separate and there's just not a happiness going on. We can feel those things, and we can also feel thoughts that are just coming in. And so it's important to realize that not all thoughts are necessarily ours, okay? That we basically live in, as though we're in a room. The planet itself is like a large room in which the collective unconscious has thoughts going on all the time. And we can be hit with thoughts that are floating in, whether they be, jealousy, envy, hatred, lust, anger, or selfishness, resentment, whatever they may be. They are really from this atmosphere. And Gandhi talked about this, Jung talked about this, many mystics speak of this, that you recognize that thoughts can float in and not necessarily be your own. So the fourth area, of course, is the thoughts that reflect God in prayer and meditation and becoming quiet and accessing the divine. We can draw in thoughts that are of the higher vibration, of the higher frequency, of the consciousness of the divine. So what do we do with all these thoughts, okay? Especially those that are from the unconscious and those that float in from our own unconscious and from the collective unconscious. Unfortunately, what most people tend to do is they make them their own. They say, these are my thoughts. And, oh my, this is me. Oh, this is who I am. Oh, I'm awful. I'm terrible. When things come in that aren't necessarily pleasant and nice, they identify the thoughts that they don't like and then label themselves, judge themselves, and do everything possible to kind of push these thoughts away and resist them and fight them and be in conflict with them. And that, folks, is suffering itself. At the Oneness University in India, they teach over and over again and emphasize that this tendency to run away from, fight, battle, escape, push away these thoughts that come in is in fact the source of our suffering, and actually the assurance it will continue. So it's this tendency that we don't want to face these things, we don't want to feel them, we don't want to experience them. And what we don't realize is that basically by feeling it, by experiencing it, we actually dissolve it. And most of these things are rooted in fear. So the answer is really, if we can just notice, and if we can just witness, and if we can just observe the thought and the feeling and experience it, but not own it, it begins to dissolve. It moves away, it breaks up. And it's in owning it and judging it and then judging ourselves that we allow the mind to keep it alive and to keep alive a sense of a separate self, because that's how this separate self really exists. And the only thing, therefore, that obstructs the flow of the fullness of God is this separate self that we've created, And so if we're able to somehow to have this separate self collapse, then the divine truly comes rushing in and takes over. The only thing that is blocking it, almost as if it's walled off, is the separate self that we've created and we've given existence. And so if we are victims of anything in life, we are victims of a separate self that we've created and allowed to be kept in place. Once that self is out of the way, then the fullness of God comes in and we're able to say, as Jesus said, the Father and I are one, are one. And so what we're all trying to create is Christ consciousness. That's the awakening we want to come into. And so you must understand that God is always there. That is a reality that exists, but we're not able to experience that reality because it is walled off with this separate self. We're not able to experience the allness and the fullness of God. We might get brief windows or moments where we kind of create a crack in that wall and in that separate self and allow it in. But the mind stays alive and active in concepts and endless facts and information and just focused on our problems. Sometimes a person's mind just has to have a problem, has to be solving and working on a problem. And the mind will keep grabbing for a problem. If they don't have one, they'll find somebody else's problem and they'll fix them. And that's the nature of the separate self, to avoid really being totally with who you are, with the divine that has created. And so for God to fully move through you, the separate self has to collapse. And that's why in India, they say, along with what mystics have said through time, that awakening is when the you is no longer there. There's the you that was a separate self that you thought was you suddenly falls away, and that is a spiritual awakening. That separate self is no longer there. So the question is, how do we collapse this separate self? Well, there are two ways. One way is through our own initiated spiritual growth and evolution. It's what we do. The other way is through God's grace. It has nothing to do with what we do. It has to be given to you. It has to happen in you as a result of the movement of grace in you. So one is what you do, and one has to be given to you, can't be achieved, all right? And that's what we call grace. First, let's look at our part. We start out, and they talk about, there in India, kind of the progression of evolution that a person goes through. Humanity starts out at a sort of what they call indulging being, where it's all about survival. One doesn't care at all about others. It's whatever they want, that's all that matters. There's a disregard for laws and rules. This kind of person can be angry, can be violent. There's no control over themselves, okay? Then a person evolves to a sort of controlling being. And this is where one is attempting to control themselves, to suppress the feelings, the emotions, and they may begin to be somewhat closed down. They don't share, they don't open up as much, they hide their feelings. Everything is kind of pushed inside, suppressed. It's controlling. So now, there are parts of us that we have thoughts and feelings and so forth. We don't want to share them with anybody, but, because we're going to control it now. And so once we were out of control, now the next phase is, we're going to try and control ourselves. Okay, and from there, a person evolves into being a conscious being. Okay, and now they know when they are indulging. Now they know when they are being controlling. They're very conscious of themselves and most everything. When they're jealous, when they're selfish, when they're rude, when they're unkind, they realize it. And they may know many things about themselves, but there is not a clarity of what it is they can do about it. You get what I'm saying? It's just, I've got this, it's horrible, it's awful, shoot, nuts. And this is where it's very important to know the difference between being conscious and being aware. They make a distinction there. When a person is conscious, there's no change. Nothing is being changed in them. They're just conscious of what they don't like about themselves, what doesn't feel good emotionally. And spiritual awareness is different. Spiritual awareness has no judgment. Judgment is an inhibitor of awareness. A person may say that they're aware or that they have awareness, but if nothing has changed in them or nothing is being transformed in them, they're just conscious. They're not really aware. In awareness, there's no interference of the mind. And when we are just conscious, there is all kinds of interference on the part of the mind. When we're conscious, the moment we see something that's determined is not good inside ourselves, we don't want it, we run from it, we fight it, we're in conflict with it, and that is suffering itself. Awareness is being ready to know what's inside. And it doesn't allow judgment of good or bad, right or wrong, it just notices. See, it's like Jesus said, judge not, and he meant that don't judge others and don't judge yourself. It'll get in the way. It'll get in the way, just notice. He said, agree with thine adversary quickly. And the adversary oftentimes is this negative thought and feeling you got going on. And just agree with it, meaning just allow it to be, notice it, don't fight it, all right? And it will dissolve. So when the anger, the jealousy, or whatever is there, one just experiences it. We don't try to stop it, fight it. That will give it more power and keep it in place. So in awareness, there really is no suffering. Where one is conscious, suffering goes on. There's just continued. So awareness is really an end of itself. Once you notice it, observe it, say, isn't that interesting? Let it be. It dissolves. And it's an end in and of itself. So that is being aware. And we can ask God to help us to to be more aware, to become more aware. God is always there to help us. Ask, seek, knock. But that's a big, big ask in the process. So the next thing after being conscious and becoming aware in our evolution is what is called awakened, or an awakened being. And this actually signals the beginning of some significant brain restructuring, okay? A restructuring of the circuitry of the brain. What actually happens is you begin to disengage and kind of rewire the brain, where you're disengaging the parietal lobes, which are all about fight or flight, and engaging with the frontal lobes, where oneness and the energies of oneness reside. So a person can begin to experience less and less suffering because they've begun to be more and more aware. And there's a period of time that even an internal conflict becomes less and less. In other words, people sometimes will take a conflict with them for hours, days, months, or years, okay? And once you begin to reach heightened states of awareness, that the longest it will stay with you is 30 minutes or less, all the way down to like less than a minute. To go from heightened states of awareness to becoming awakened is an act of grace. It has to be given to you. It has to be a shift brought on by God. And more people are moving into these awakened states all over the planet. And this is what the Oneness University is seeking to assist as it shifts the collective consciousness of humanity. It's a unique time we're living in. These energies of God, the Holy Spirit, Kundalini, whatever you want to call them, are happening. And it's documented. I'm experiencing these people. It's happening. And so then you can move on beyond that. Beyond becoming awakened is what is being called fully awakened, where there is actually zero suffering. The mind has fallen away, and there is no separate self. And beyond that is God realization. We don't need to get into those because really awakening is enough for us right now. And that's what's really moving on the planet. So how does one become awakened? And we're talking about awakened where there is no psychological suffering. There's no internal conflict. There's no haunting from thoughts of your past. There's no worrying and stress about the future. There is a tendency to be in the moment. That is the state of being awakened, okay? So how does one do that? Well, first is by actually really getting to the place where you believe that's possible. Because we have all this skepticism, you see. This is new, this is different, doesn't sound exactly how I have heard it's supposed to happen, da, 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 da. So you can have your mind, the separate self, do battle and kind of push and shove it away. So number one is, first thing is believing this is possible now for you. Second is by asking God to take you there, okay? Asking for His grace to take you to this state of awakening, to allow that shift to take place in you, that it can only happen with the grace of God. Third is by cultivating a passion for it to occur, and passion for awakening in you versus desire. Desire basically has no strength in it. Desire could be like it's a request, it's a preference, like the salad dressing you want on your salad. It's like, it can be real basic like that. A passion is deeper, you know, it's more intense. It occupies your whole being. It's emotional, it's intentional, it's of the heart. It's focused on your spiritual awakening. It's something you want more than anything else in the world. It's there. Make it important because that's what you're in this life for, is to awaken. So it has that degree of importance. And Jesus spoke to passion, you know, in his opening remarks to the Sermon on the Mount, he said, "Blessed are those that hunger and thirst after righteousness." And what he meant was those who hunger and thirst have passion for right relation to the divine, okay? And in another place, there was a passage where a man in the crowd asked Jesus to tell his brother to give him half of the inheritance. Apparently, they were in conflict. And Jesus' response to that person was, "Take heed, be aware of covetousness, For one's life does not consist in the abundance of things he possesses. And then he went on and told a parable about a guy who had so much of the fruits of life, he didn't know what to do with it all, and where to go with it, so he decided to tear down his barns and build and erect new barns and new facilities to house all his crops and the fruits of his goods. And the man says then, and this is in the parable from Jesus, the man says, I will say to my soul, soul, you have many goods laid up for many years. Take it easy, eat, drink, and be merry. But God said, and this is still the parable Jesus is saying, but God says, fool, fool. What he's saying is a person, he said, a person whose intention is to only lay up treasure for himself and is not rich toward God, and those are the terms, rich toward God is a fool, is a fool. And then he turns to his disciples and he says, therefore I say to you, do not worry about your life, what you'll eat, what you will, nor about your body, what you'll put on, because life is much more than what you're going to eat and what you put on in clothing. And so it's about passion. And he was speaking to passion, hungering and thirsting and becoming rich toward God. So if you really want to diminish or eliminate suffering, increase peace and joy, move toward awakening, collapse the separate self, basically do this. Make spiritual growth your greatest focus. Drop any idea that God issues suffering or punishment. Become aware that suffering is a product of the separate self. Stop running away from feelings and emotions that are unpleasant. Don't identify with them, but simply notice and experience and let them dissolve, like a cloud just passing by. And next, ask God to take you deeper. Ask and pray for the grace of God to awaken you. Have a passion for awakening. And get oneness blessings and oneness meditations here at the ministry whenever possible. We didn't come here to be born, accumulate a bunch of stuff, and die. We came here to be awakened, and now is the time. Thy will be done in you. God bless you all. Happy holidays from Unity of Houston. I'm Reverend Howard Caesar.
And I'm Diane Caesar.
And we would like to invite you to join us Christmas Eve at our wonderful candle lighting services, in which we celebrate the birth of Jesus Christ. We have wonderful soul-enriching music, and each and every person is given the opportunity to light a candle to feel their connection to God.
Our Christmas Eve services are at 4, 6, and 8 p.m.
And we'd also like to invite you to join us for our New Year's Eve services, in which we give everyone an opportunity to release the past and have a fresh, happy, fulfilling start of the new year.
Join us New Year's Eve at 6 and 8 p.m. And if you want more information and directions, please go to our website, unityhouston.org.
Thank you for joining us for today's message. We invite you to be with us again next Sunday. At Unity, we believe that God's presence of love and goodness is everywhere, and that life is meant to be good. You can find out more about Unity and our teachings at unityhouston.org.